It is 31 past the hour. Joining us now, Democratic presidential candidate, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Good to have you on board this morning.
It's great to be back.
Okay, so you say the race is wide open, and historically, changes have been seen at this state of the game.
Not historically, consistently.
But what's going to change it at this point?
Well, look, we've never had in our party, the Democratic Party in our lifetime, never has there been someone who's leading in the polls this far out ever going on to be president. It's been Jimmy Carter, who's polling around 1% at this time. Bill Clinton around 4% at this time. The Washington Post, as I was saying earlier, keeps this wonderful Twitter feed, Who Led, which they talk about where people were. Barack Obama was 21 points behind Hillary Clinton at this time. This election hasn't settled. I just came back from Iowa. About 80% of people there have said they've not come to a conclusion on who their certain candidate is. And so this is wide open, and this is won on the ground in Iowa.
So what's hard is the debates, because there's like 40,000 people on stage, and you get like 30 seconds to make your case. So I'm going to help you define yourself from the two front runners.
Right.
So let's start with Elizabeth Warren. She's got this $20 billion plan, and she's explained how to pay for it. How does yours differ, and what would be wrong with hers in your mind?
Well, first of all, let's pull the aperture back a little bit for a second. And whoever our nominee is going to have to be able to unite the people from the left of our party, the moderates of our party, and I'm most certainly the person that can best do that. Everybody on the stage coming up in November, I think there'll be 9 of us, believes that everybody in this country should have coverage and should have it. The question is who's the person that can next bring the ball as far down the field to that goal
Does her
line?
plan work?
Well, look, I'm going to say very clearly, I know you and I both know a lot of Democratic senators. Barack Obama failed to get the public option or to bring Medicare eligibility down to 55 because of Democrats not all voting to support the plan. And you and I know folks like Joe Manchin and others are not going to support that plan. So if you have to start talking about, I believe in the goal line being universal health care, everybody having it. But the steps getting there is going to be what can you cobble together? How do you get things done? And as one of the people running, who's gotten, in fact, the only major bipartisan bill that's gotten past this president was the criminal justice reform bill that I led from the Democratic side. It didn't do everything I wanted to do. It was a result of a compromise, but God, it moved the ball pretty far down the field.
So Joe Biden says he has the experience, the contacts across the globe, decades of service to back up the argument that he can restore order to the presidency, that he can bring things back to normal and move America forward. What makes you have more experience or more ability than Joe Biden?
Well, first of all, I've been everything from a chief executive of New Jersey's largest city in the middle of a crisis all the way to a senator getting things done. And I think as my favorite new author, I said a little earlier, we're not going to win this election. People have to understand we've got one shot to make Donald Trump a one-term president. We need a movement in this election, someone who can activate and engage the entire breadth of our party, create excitement and enthusiasm. And this is, again, why we've seen from the Democratic Party that people that have gone on to be president are the folks that can create and activate that movement election. I believe I'm the best person in this field to unify us and to engage and excite the key electorates that we need in the future.
So back to health care.
Yes.
Part of the problem might be that most Americans, maybe a huge majority of Americans, really don't ask what anything costs. You go to the doctors, they say, hey, did you get your flu shot yet? No, I didn't. You want a flu shot? Yeah. They don't say how much is it or anything like that, okay? But they do know what their drugs cost them.
Yes.
When they go to CVS and stand in line to get their prescriptions filled. What could you do immediately upon your election to change the structure of drug pricing?
Well, immediately, that's to me one of the biggest pain points in our country. I've got people in my community putting aside their insulin drugs because they can't, or rationing it, not being able to buy their inhalers. So number one, actually, the president of the United States can use Medicare to negotiate down costs. That's something I'm going to do. We should do exactly what other countries are doing, pulling away patents from companies that raise their prices of our drugs in our country higher than Canada or peer nations. That will be unacceptable. So the president has a lot of actions. This president's talked about it, done nothing about it. I will do something about it. And the other thing I want to say to you is this idea about attacking us in the Democratic Party because of the costs of our plans. This is a Republican Party that literally just blew multiple trillion-dollar holes in our overall budget national debt in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest of the wealthy and to corporations that use that not to give workers a pay increase, to do stock buybacks, which were illegal before the 80s, to gin up their stock price, a third of which is owned by people outside of our country. Talk about fiscal irresponsibility. If you look at Democratic presidents versus Republican presidents, debt deficits have always skyrocketed under Republican presidents. We've been more fiscally responsible. So I know this as a mayor. We've got a healthcare system that incentivizes all the wrong behaviors. Don't take your prescription drug. Oh, if you have something that's hurting you, wait for a little while before you go see a doctor because of the cost of that copay. And you know what ends up happening? And I see this. People end up in emergency rooms where the cost of the care is so much more expensive.
That's the doctor.
Yes. And so this is a system right now as we have it that is we can't afford the system we have right now, approaching 20% of our economy. It is so broken, so expensive. And on top of that, we get the worst results of the industrial world. We need to have courageous leaders. That's why I'm saying we need to completely reimagine our system and start to incentivize preventative care, early intervention, early detection, affordable prescription drugs, the kind of things we know can drive down costs. I can build the majorities in Congress to get us down the field more towards the day when health care is a right for every American.
Karine.
Can I, just to add to what you're saying about healthcare, you also have a Trump administration that's in the courts right now,
Yes.
taking away healthcare from tens of millions of people. So the fact that Democrats are having a conversation about how to make healthcare better and how to expand it and cover more people, I think that's a good conversation for Democrats to have, especially for their base. And I also wanted to agree with you on how the race is still very fluid. And what matters are these early states.
Yes.
And I've heard from people in Iowa that you have a strong operation on the ground in Iowa, so that's good for you. My question now is on impeachment. What should Democrats do as we're talking about health care, as we're talking about issues that really matter, the economy and this tax cuts that we've seen from the Trump administration? How do they walk and chew gum, able to really push hard on an impeachment in a fair way and also talk about all the other issues that are important to people?
Well, you said it. This is we're talking about removing a sitting president from office. And when you say that word fair way, this has to be done in a way that is sobered with the gravity with which it should be dealt with, in a way that builds consensus in this country and doesn't create deeper partisan divisions. And that's why I really do believe that we can't put this in the context of a political campaign for presidency. This is a hopefully once in generations event. We have a president that, in my opinion, has butchered his oath of office. And that should be dealt with in the most sobered way possible. So I understand that this is in the middle of a presidential campaign, but I swore an oath to do my duty, to defend, protect the Constitution. And I'm not going to allow this to be politicized. I think that we all, Democrats and Republicans, should be showing some statespersonship at this point.
All right. Jonathan Lemire.
Hey, Senator, the Democratic field thinned a little bit in the last couple of days. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke dropped out, in part because of some fundraising struggles. You yourself, about a month ago, had to have an emergency fundraising appeal in order to make enough money to stay in the race, you said. You were able to do that. But that might be something that's hard to duplicate. So my question to you is, how's your fundraising now? Are you going to be able to afford to stay in this campaign until Iowa?
Well, thank you very much for that question, because you give me a chance to make the appeal. Look, as was just said, hands down, this race in Iowa is going to be won on the ground. And the teams that have had the best campaigns, and this is not me saying it, the Des Moines Register, the Iowa starting line, says that me and Elizabeth Warren have had the best ground games in all of Iowa. Now, we've got to keep that up now, that we need to put more people on the ground. And that's why I'm telling folks, if we're going to continue to be competitive, and in fact, me and Elizabeth Warren lead the whole field in endorsements from activists and elected leaders, I've got to keep the pressure on. And so we really want people to keep going to CoryBooker.com. We just are hiring up in Iowa now, but we need to continue to hire more. And that's going to be folks understanding that I can win not only Iowa, but after that, demographically, the world changes, and I believe I'm the best person not only to take on the other people in this race, but to take on Donald Trump as well in states like Wisconsin, where we lost that by maybe less than 10,000 votes, and 70,000 less African Americans came out to vote in Milwaukee than had in 16 than had voted in 2012. We need a candidate that can energize our entire base, but it all is going to come down to who can emerge out of Iowa. I've set us up with the best team, most endorsements, but we've got to keep building that team, and I hope people will go to CoryBooker.com.
All right, staying in the game with that website.
Yes.
And I know you're meeting this, I think, Wednesday with Dr. Dave Campbell for a health check. So good luck with that. And we'll see you back again here on Morning Joe. Senator Cory Booker, thank you so
you for
much.
having me.
Coming up, another presidential candidate, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, joins us in just a few minutes. We're back with more Morning Joe in just a moment.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.